It's 4:30 and we're probably ready to begin as folks come in. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Carolyn Medine. I'm the director of the Institute for African American Studies and a professor in the Religion Department. And I'm very happy to welcome you all to this conversation with Dr. Eddie S. Glaude on his book, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own. The Institute would very much like to thank Dr. Nicholas Allen and the Willson Center for Humanities and Arts for their support of this event through the Distinguished Artist and Lecturer Program. And we'd also like to thank the Religion Department for its support. And there are some religion folks watching today. My task this afternoon is just to introduce Dr. Pavlich, who will moderate the discussion, and Dr. Glaude, who is our guest this afternoon. Dr. Pavlich is a distinguished research professor of English, African American Studies, and Creative Writing here at the University of Georgia. He's the author of 13 published and forthcoming books. His most recent books include Let It Be Broke in 2020, Another Kind of Madness in 2019, Live at the Bitter End in 2018, and Who Can Afford to Improvise? James Baldwin and Black Music, the Lyric and the Listener in 2016. His forthcoming books are Outward, Adrian Rich's Expanding Solitudes, forthcoming in 2021, and Call It in the Air, coming in 2023. Our speaker, Dr. Eddie S. Glaude, is an intellectual who speaks to the complex dynamics of the American experience. His well-known books, Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul, and In a Shade of Blue, Pragmatism and the Politics of Black America, take a wide look at Black communities, the difficulties of race in the United States, and the challenges our democracy faces. He's an American critic in the tradition of James Baldwin and Ralph Waldo Emerson. In his writings, the country's complexities, vulnerabilities, and opportunities for hope come into full view. Hope that is, in one of his favorite quotations from Du Bois, not hopeless, but a bit unhopeful. He is the James S. McDonald Distinguished Professor and Chair of the Department of African American Studies, a program he first became involved with shaping as a doctoral candidate in religion at Princeton. He's the former president of the American Academy of Religion. His books on religion and philosophy include An Uncommon Faith, a pragmatic approach to the study of African American religion, African American religion, a very short introduction, and Exodus, Religion, Race, and Nation in Early 19th Century Black America, which was awarded the Modern Language Association's William Sanders Scarborough Book Prize. Dr. Glaude is also the author of 2 edited volumes and many influential articles about religion for academic journals. He also has written for the likes of the New York Times and Time Magazine. Known to be a convener of conversations and debates, Dr. Glaude takes care to engage fellow citizens of all ages and backgrounds, from young activists to fellow academics, journalists and commentators, and followers on Twitter, in dialogue about the direction of the nation. His scholarship and his sense of himself as a public intellectual are driven by a commitment to think carefully with others in public. Some like to describe Dr. Glaude as the quintessential Morehouse man, having left his home in Moss Point, Mississippi at age 16 to begin studies at the HBCU. He holds a master's degree in African American Studies from Temple University and his PhD in religion from Princeton. He began his teaching career at Bowdoin College. In 2011, he delivered the Harvard's Du Bois Lectures. In remarks titled Turning Our Backs, that were recognized by the New York Times as one of the best commencement speeches of the year, he spoke when he was given an honorary doctorate at Colgate College. He's a columnist for Time Magazine, an MSNBC contributor on programs like Morning Joe and Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace, and he also appears regularly on Meet the Press on Sundays. Dr. Glaude also hosts the podcast AAS 21, recorded at Princeton University in Stanhope Hall, the African American Studies Department home. Glaude's most recent book, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own, is our focus today. It was released June 30th, 2020. Of Baldwin, Dr. Glaude writes, Baldwin's writing does not bear witness to the glory of America. It reveals the country's sins and the illusion of innocence that binds us to the reality of others. Baldwin's vision requires a confrontation with our history, with slavery, with Jim Crow segregation, and with whiteness to overcome its hold on us, not to posit the greatness of America, but to establish the ground upon which to imagine the country anew. We're very happy to welcome Dr. Eddie Glaude, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ed Pavlich, who is our host this afternoon.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carolyn. Thanks, Eddie, man, for coming out, for being with us here, and of course, thank everybody who's tuned in to be with us as well. We have about an hour and 15 minutes or so, and the aim is to spend as much of that in conversation as we can, and try to generate places to talk in ways that maybe we hadn't foreseen coming or aren't exactly scripted. But before that, I'd really like Professor Glaude, Eddie, to read a little bit of the book, Begin Again, just to give us a sound and a feel for how it comes through his voice and what the breath sounds like on the page. So if you could do that, man, just a short, however much you want, 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. It'd be great if you could do that.
Thank you so much. And, Ed, Professor Pavlich, it's always wonderful to be in conversation with you about a wide range of things, but especially about James Baldwin. He's a walking partner for both of us, and I've learned so much from you about him over the years. I also want to thank Dr. Medine for that extraordinary and wonderfully gracious introduction. I need my mom. I have to send this recording to my mom so she can understand some things. But thank you so much. So let me just go ahead and read a bit, and then we can jump in conversation. I arrived in Heidelberg, Germany on a hot Saturday morning, the day after leaving Newark, New Jersey. This was the beginning of my stay at Heidelberg University as the 2018 recipient of the James W.C. Pennington Award. Born on the eastern shore of Maryland in 1809, Pennington escaped slavery at the age of 18, learned to read and write, and was the first Black man to attend classes at Yale University. He went on to become a minister, and in 1849, the Heidelberg Faculty of Theology awarded him an honorary doctorate. It was the first time, I believe, that a European university bestowed such an academic honor on an African American. And here I was, a country boy from Moss Point, Mississippi, who wrote about religion and race in the United States, flying across the world to accept an honor named after Pennington at a university founded in 1386. I met James, an American graduate student from a small town in Michigan, who was studying at Heidelberg, as I checked into my apartment, house 2, number 64. He was charged with getting me settled on my first day at the university. The elevator wasn't working, so we walked up 3 flights of stairs with 3 weeks worth of clothes in my suitcase. The apartment was small. I opened the door and immediately found myself in a kitchenette with the bathroom and shower right next to it. The stove had 2 burners. The oven was a microwave. Five steps in, I stood in my bedroom, living room, dining room. The bed doubled as a couch. Then I spotted my desk. Nothing else mattered after that. The apartment, with its high ceilings that kept the room from closing in on you, had a dated feel, and comfort was not its primary concern. In fact, this part of the Heidelberg campus, and it is a stretch to describe it as a campus in any American sense, wasn't very appealing at all. All the buildings felt like they were constructed in the 1960s and 70s, square monstrosities with little character, strictly functional. James waited for me outside. We were going to buy my train pass, check out the grocery store, and travel to the Altstadt, the old city. As we entered the station, I heard screaming. People in front of us stood still and stared at some kind of commotion. I followed their eyes. 4 policemen were piled on a black man. One officer had his knee in the man's back, the others twisted his arms, his pants were halfway down his legs, his bare ass was exposed. The police pressed his head down into the concrete as if they were trying to leave the imprint of a leaf there. With each attempt to cuff him, the man let out a blood-curdling scream. All eyes were on him as the crowd stood by and watched intently, like spectators at a soccer game without any real attachment to the teams playing. I watched them as they watched the police and the black man. Their faces revealed nothing. They were inscrutable, at least to me. I had not been in Heidelberg for 2 hours, and police had a black man's face pressed down on the concrete with a knee in his back. He screamed again. I didn't understand his pained words. I didn't know what he had done. If anything, I only knew the screaming was all too familiar. James turned beet red, and for some reason felt the need to apologize to me. There's a kind of isolation being in a place where you do not know the language. Words do not interrupt your vision. Silence allows you to see differently. During my short time in Heidelberg, I took in the landscape, the wildflowers, the cobblestone roads, the old buildings bleeding into new construction. One noticed a sadness. Perhaps it was the feeling of a place that had experienced the devastation of war, or the effect of having a US military base shut down and the struggle of figuring out what would happen next. I saw the whiteness of the place, a smattering of color here and there, a soul food restaurant that played Al Green and served only Ethiopian food. And I heard the beauty and harshness of a language I could not understand. Whatever I was experiencing, even in that initial traumatic moment, I was not in the United States, and to my mind, that was a good thing. I did not have to go on television and explain what happened at the train station. I did not have to explain it to James either. I wondered at the time if this was what James Baldwin initially felt when he lived abroad, an escape from the constant demand to deal with what was happening in the States and what was happening in him because of it. Paris became a refuge of sorts in his early days. Whatever Baldwin faced there, at least he didn't have to deal with the barrage of racist nonsense here. And in the silence that his lack of French afforded him, he could reimagine himself. It is exhausting to find oneself over and over again, navigating a world rife with deadly assumptions about you and those who look like you, to see and read about insult and harm, death and anguish for no other reason than because you're black or poor, black and poor, or black and trans, or for me, the daily grind consumes. I cannot escape the news. I'm drowning in it. And in all the nastiness of a country that seems or feels like it's going underwater. Heidelberg afforded some critical distance, a brief refuge from it all. A small apartment in a place where I did not know the language offered me an opportunity to be still, to quiet my head, and think about my country and the moment we currently find ourselves in.
Great. Great. Thanks so much for doing that.